She was humiliated right there in the first-class lounge just for wearing jeans, an old sweater, and carrying a faded canvas backpack. She must have wandered in from economy, someone sneered while another whispered. Looks like she's here for a job interview, not a flight. When airport security approached and asked her to leave if she couldn't verify her ticket, the entire lounge seemed to nod in smug agreement. Until the airline CEO bowed before her and said, "This is the new owner of the company you're all flying with." Evelyn Miller felt the heat of embarrassment settle in her cheeks during those first few agonizing moments, though she kept her head high, refusing to let them see any sign of weakness. She had chosen an inconspicuous corner near the wide glass windows where the bustle of planes taxiing in the distance looked almost serene, but the whispers surrounded her in a suffocating ring. A heavy-set man in a tailored navy suit had glowered at her from behind a gold-rimmed glass of champagne, his expression so openly hostile that she half expected him to fling the flute at her. A slender woman wearing pristine designer heels and carrying a matching luggage set took a step back as though her presence alone had contaminated the lounge. Others, drawn by the tension, began to turn their heads in her direction, curiosity mingling with a certain predatory amusement. It was the sort of mob cruelty that always thrives in places where appearances are currency, and Evelyn recognized it immediately. She had grown up seeing how quickly people judge when outward polish is absent. So she sat in her worn jeans and oversized sweater legs crossed at the ankles, trying to keep her breathing steady as the hostility crept closer. The lounge's plush carpets and gleaming marble counters seemed designed to remind visitors they were in a realm where only the top percentile of travelers existed. Rows of imported wines lined a backlit bar, and the aroma of freshly baked croissants wafted through the air, everything curated to cultivate an atmosphere of luxury. Overhead lighting glowed in soft gold, illuminating elaborate chandeliers that probably cost more than most families' annual incomes. In such an environment, Evelyn's simple attire stood out like a needle in fine silk. She felt the stares brushing over her as if testing how she would react. In her backpack, a battered paperback novel peeked out its corner dog-eared. She didn't care about the brand of her luggage or the cost of her clothes. That had never defined her. But she realized how deeply appearances meant everything here. Before the security staffer even approached, Evelyn noticed a hush fall over a cluster of VIP travelers. A few turned to each other with condescending nods, and one particularly loud man with a shaved head and a brash, polished watch pinned her with a judgmental glare. "She obviously doesn't belong," he declared, voice pitched to Carrie. "These seats are for people who pay for them." A titter of agreement followed from a group of older executives. It was only then that the staffer, a woman with impeccably pressed uniform slacks, came forward, an air of superiority stiffening her shoulders. Her voice carried the final blow of condemnation. "Ma'am, this lounge is reserved for first-class and premium passengers. If you do not have the credentials, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate the area." Though she kept her tone professional, the dismissive flicker in her eyes said she expected no argument. Evelyn tried to speak, but the staffer cut her off. "Please, let's avoid any disturbance," she added, stepping forward as if to begin gathering Evelyn's backpack to escort her out. Evelyn's heart pounded, a mix of anger and shame swelling inside her chest. She glanced around, seeking even a single sympathetic gaze. All she found were smirks and folded arms. In that moment, memories tugged at her from years before, memories of her mother wearing a threadbare coat to a family function, standing among relatives who flaunted new designer suits. She remembered how her mother had borne it all with quiet dignity, refusing to apologize for not flaunting wealth. The harsh words from her father still echoed, "Don't stoop to them, Evelyn. Kindness and patience in the face of mockery reveal more strength than any brand label." That father was once among the wealthiest of men, though he never paraded it before the world. And though he was gone now, his legacy of humility lived on in her. She inhaled deeply, mustering the grace to remain calm. When the staffer reached for her backpack, Evelyn lifted her chin. "I have a pass," she said, voice steady but edged with tension. She reached into a side pocket, hoping to extract a black membership card. But her old wallet, worn at the seams, snagged. The staffer took the opportunity to raise an eyebrow in triumph, as if she had already caught Evelyn in a lie. "All right," the staffer said in clipped tones. "If you have a pass, then please show it now. Otherwise, we do have other guests who need these seats." A large woman in a pearl necklace, audible enough to rattle with her every movement, sniffed loudly. "They let just anyone in these days," she murmured to a companion who nodded vigorously and muttered something about lack of class. The old shame threatened to break Evelyn's composure. She forced herself to keep steady, rummaging carefully in her backpack's compartments. Yet the pass was not in its usual spot. Her breath hitched. She realized she had placed it somewhere else in the hustle of leaving home. The staffer's impatience grew with each second. A younger passenger perched on a leather seat with a silver laptop balanced on his knees had angled his phone to discreetly film the incident, almost certain it appeared that it would end in Evelyn's forced removal. He wore a smirk that said he knew exactly how this scene would go viral, probably under some hashtag about imposters in first class. Others, emboldened by the prospect of a quick resolution, moved to free chairs near Evelyn, dragging their carry-ons to block the way so she couldn't remain. Evelyn exhaled, her pulse pounding in her ears, reminding herself that she wouldn't buckle under their scrutiny. To intensify the humiliation, a businesswoman standing near a window seat offered a theatrical sigh. She was tall, with a chiseled face and hair meticulously dyed. She adjusted her immaculate white blazer, then said in a pitying tone, "Look, I'm all for giving people a chance, but this is what happens when everyone thinks they're special. Honey, not everyone is meant to be in first class." The words stung partly because they were delivered with a veneer of false sympathy, and partly because they reflected the arrogance Evelyn despised. She felt the scorching flush of tears threaten behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. Her father's voice lingered again. "Never let them reduce you to tears, Evelyn. Make your silence speak louder than their words." And so, she held her tongue, focusing on the frantic rustling inside her bag. A new wave of tension rippled through the lounge when security, alerted by the staff, approached from the side. Two uniformed officers, each wearing alert, dispassionate expressions, advanced in her direction. "Is there a problem here?" one of them asked, scanning the faces. The staffer gestured curtly to Evelyn. "This passenger can't produce valid documentation for lounge access," she said. "We've asked her to leave. She's holding up space for legitimate passengers." The officer turned his attention to Evelyn. "Ma'am, do you have your first-class ticket or lounge pass?" She looked up, gave a small shrug, and said, "I do have a pass, but I'm trying to find it. My flight details are in my phone." But the officer's gaze already told her he assumed she was lying or at best incompetent. He slid a hand near his belt as if to prepare for an official escort. Another officer took a step forward, scanning Evelyn's face for any hint of resistance. That was the moment a hush fell, the crowd parted, eyes shifting away from the commotion at the lounge's entrance. A figure stepped into view, flanked by two associates in dark suits. It was impossible not to notice him. He carried the unmistakable air of corporate leadership posture, upright hair slicked back, wearing a subtle but perfectly cut suit. The lounge manager, who had been lingering uncertainly at the side, paled and hurried forward. "Sir," she exclaimed, voice trembling with respect. The man gave her a small, distracted nod and moved past, his eyes zeroing in on Evelyn. She froze, uncertain what fresh confrontation this might bring. But then she saw his expression, a deep warmth, a quiet deference, and her heart lifted. She recognized him as the CEO of the Airline group, though she had never met him in person. They had only spoken via phone or indirect memos. Still, she had recognized his face from internal corporate presentations. He approached her seat with purposeful steps. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning so that his voice carried to everyone present, "if I may have your attention." The hum of conversation died, instantly replaced by a tense electric curiosity. Even the security officers paused, eyes wide, uncertain how to proceed. The man offered a slight bow of respect toward Evelyn. "Allow me to introduce Evelyn Miller, co-founder and principal owner of Miller Airways, which finalized a complete acquisition of the airline you are all flying with." A shockwave of silence followed his words. For a heartbeat, no one moved or breathed. Then a cascade of gasps and exclamations rippled through the lounge. The staffer who had demanded Evelyn's pass stepped back, her face blanching. The businesswoman in the white blazer actually dropped the magazine she'd been clutching. The man with the camera phone lowered it, mouth half open in disbelief. Even security looked unsettled, exchanging uncertain glances as they processed the CEO's statement. For Evelyn, a surge of relief and exasperation welled up in equal measure. She hadn't wanted a grand reveal, especially not this public. She had planned to use her new acquisition stake as a silent means to observe airline operations from the ground level, hoping to see genuine customer experiences. But fate had forced her hand. She stood carefully, setting her backpack aside, and gazed at the sea of astonished faces. The lounge's hush felt more profound than any crowd's laughter. And as eyes fell upon her disheveled jeans and simple sweater, The incongruity of her appearance with her title threatened to short-circuit the snobbery saturating the room. The CEO, his name Jonathan Choi, spoke again, voice calm but tinged with an edge of reproach. "I see many of you questioning how Ms. Miller might be here in such attire," he said, nodding toward her sweater and backpack. "But let me assure you, she has every right to be. In fact, she now outranks all of us." He paused to let that sink in. Miller Airways has merged with our airline, effectively placing Ms. Miller in the position of controlling interest. Her leadership in the aviation sector is as unorthodox as it is visionary, and we are privileged to have her here if she'll still tolerate us. A faint wryness crept into his tone, acknowledging the tension that hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn found her composure returning as the wave of shock subdued the crowd. The security officers, looking mortified, each took a half-step backward. One of them stammered an apology. I'm sorry, Ms. Miller. We didn't realize." The staffer who had demanded her pass opened her mouth to speak, but seemed too flustered to form words. Meanwhile, the lounge manager tried to salvage the situation, offering a stiff bow and an invitation to a private lounge or the best seat in the house. But Evelyn politely shook her head. She turned her gaze upon the group who had so openly taunted her. The large man with the champagne flute now stared at the floor. The tall businesswoman pressed her lips together, visibly shaken. The once vocal throng parted like contrite schoolchildren, their bravado dissolved under the glare of truth. Drawing a slow breath, Evelyn gave the CEO a thankful nod, then retrieved a diamond-tier boarding pass from the side pocket of her backpack. There it was all along, tucked in a seldom-used flap. She held it up, letting everyone see the validity of her seat. The hush deepened, and she felt a curious sense of responsibility weigh on her. She recalled a memory of her father teaching her that money and position are illusions, if not used with empathy. "Power is how you treat someone who can't repay you," he had told her. She wanted to handle this moment in a way that reflected those words. Because while a part of her felt the urge to lash out to condemn the entire lounge for their cruelty, another part recognized that the best lesson might be silent demonstration. Jonathan Choi stepped back, allowing Evelyn to address the lounge if she wished. The tension was palpable, a hush of anticipation. She looked over the faces, each reflecting a blend of shame and residual arrogance. Quietly, she said, "Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Choi." She paused, letting her voice rest in the silence. "I'm sure many of you had your reasons for suspecting I wasn't a legitimate traveler. My appearance doesn't match the typical profile for this lounge, I understand that." She glimpsed the staffer who had confronted her, the security officers who had nearly escorted her out, and those passengers who had been filming or sneering. "But we're about to transition the airline into a new era," Evelyn continued softly, "and one of my hopes is that we learn to treat people well no matter what they look like or where." She glanced at the businesswoman in the white blazer who cringed visibly. "Because the most luxurious thing in any lounge isn't the seat number, it's how you treat someone you don't recognize." The words hung in the air, echoing through the hush. Evelyn then turned to Jonathan with a faint smile. "I'm tired," she said simply, "and I have a flight to catch. Thank you for stepping in." He gave her a polite bow of acknowledgement. A wave of unsettled shifting moved through the lounge. Some tried to move aside as if clearing her path to any seat she desired. Others remained still, heads lowered in embarrassment. The businesswoman found the courage to speak, voice trembling with contrition. "Ms. Miller," she began, I owe you a huge apology. My behavior was inexcusable. If there's anything I can do to—" She trailed off, words failing her. Evelyn watched her with an unreadable expression, feeling a mix of pity and satisfaction. She recognized the apology for what it was, an attempt at damage control, but she also saw genuine regret in the woman's eyes. So she gave a single nod. "Thank you for apologizing," she said. "We can all learn from this." After that, a line of onlookers began to form, some stepping forward to stammer apologies, others offering to fetch her refreshments or to give up their seats. The staffer kept her gaze down, only occasionally meeting Evelyn's eyes to mouth silent regrets. The security officers retreated to the lounge perimeter, uncertain whether their presence was still needed, clearly relieved that no fiasco had escalated. Evelyn offered a measured courtesy to each, acknowledging attempts at contrition without dwelling on them. She had no desire to humiliate them further. Indeed, she had come to observe, and she had observed enough. Jonathan Choi guided Evelyn toward a newly vacated seat near the window, one with plush cushions and a small table bearing a crystal water jug. The irony was obvious. An hour ago, people would have fought to keep her away from such a seat. Now they nearly tripped over themselves to offer it. She settled in, exhaling a slow breath. Outside the window, she could see a plane in the process of taxiing, sun glinting off its hull. She let the hush of engines and the dance of runway vehicles distract her for a moment, reflecting on how quickly human behavior transforms under the lens of status. She was reminded again of her mother's quiet stoicism when ridiculed, and her father's unwavering stance that one must never flaunt wealth to earn respect. True respect is found in the heart, not the eyes, he would say. A short while later, Jonathan approached quietly, his aides having drifted to the side. "Ms. Miller," he said in a low voice, "we can arrange a private suite for you if you'd prefer, or I can escort you to the terminal's VIP corridor." She looked at him, brow furrowing slightly. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," she replied. "I'll just wait for my boarding call here." A flicker of admiration crossed his face. He nodded in understanding. "Then I'll leave you to your peace. If you need anything, please let me know." She nodded and he walked away, stopping briefly to have a stern word with the lounge manager and staffer. Evelyn guessed he was emphasizing new directives about courtesy to all travelers, though she couldn't hear the exact words. She noticed how the staffer's posture sank as if chastised. The lounge gradually resumed an air of forced normalcy. People returned to their seats, though the tension lingered in each stolen glance. A few tried to continue their conversations about business deals overseas, expansions, or personal investments. But the undercurrent remained clear. Everyone in that lounge was grappling with having deeply misjudged a stranger. Evelyn half wanted to slip out of the lounge to find a quieter corner of the airport, but she also felt an odd sense of duty to remain visible, to let them come to terms with the revelation that she, in her faded sweater, old jeans and canvas backpack, held more influence than all their assumptions. So she sat there, her battered paperback open on her lap, occasionally flipping a page while hardly registering the text. Her mind was too full of swirling thoughts, memories of her father's instructions, her mother's grace, the new responsibilities that came with ownership of an entire airline, and the conviction that she needed to transform the culture from within. She took a sip of water poured into a crystal tumbler by a suddenly attentive waiter. The coldness of the drink grounded her. Then she let her gaze wander across the lounge, taking in the subdued hush. The man with the camera phone had put it away, presumably ashamed to continue filming. The large man who had been drinking champagne was now perched stiffly, eyes flicking up to her with fleeting guilt. The businesswoman in the white blazer had retreated to a far table, her posture rigid. At intervals, these people would look at her as if hoping for a second chance at conversation, or simply a sign that she didn't hate them. Evelyn gave them nothing but the occasional polite half-smile, which only seemed to heighten their discomfort. She realized she might never see these individuals again once she boarded her plane. Yet this day would remain etched in their memories, a reminder that wealth and status can be hidden in the most unassuming forms. The overhead screens announced that a private jet had landed, and soon the door leading into the lounge slid open. A group of uniformed pilots walked in, scanning the area for Ms. Miller. They spotted her and offered crisp salutes. She recognized them as part of the airline's top-level test flight crew, probably summoned by Jonathan to ensure her next flight was seamless. She rose from her seat, that old backpack slung over one shoulder. A fleeting hush fell once more. People recognized that her departure was imminent. Some stood awkwardly, not sure whether to wave or remain silent. The staffer who had caused the initial confrontation hurried forward with trembling hands. "Ms. Miller," she said in a quiet voice, "I truly apologize for my behavior." I never thought Evelyn placed a gentle hand on the staffer's forearm. "Let's remember this day, and use it to do better," was all she said, letting the staffer's eyes brim with gratitude. Stepping into the corridor with the pilots, Evelyn felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. She was relieved to leave behind the tension, but also aware that her new role carried the weight of reshaping such attitudes across the entire airline network. She couldn't just rely on chance encounters to teach lessons. She would have to implement clear guidelines about customer treatment, about humility in service, about recognizing every passenger's dignity. Her father had always said that the measure of a leader is how well they champion the voiceless. Now she had the power to enact that change at scale, so long as she remained true to her core beliefs. They passed through a security checkpoint quickly, her high-level clearance and the pilot's credentials ensuring no delays. Evelyn's mind wandered to a day in her teenage years when she'd accompanied her mother to a budget flight to visit relatives. Her mother, wearing scuffed shoes and discount store pants, had been overlooked by staff until they needed seats for a wealthier passenger. She'd been asked to move with no apology or compensation. Evelyn recalled how her mother complied graciously without complaint, telling her afterward, "What matters is, we got there safely, darling." But Evelyn, young and furious, had gripped her mother's hand and vowed that if she ever had the power, she would never let that happen to someone again. The memory flooded her now, fueling her determination. At a side entrance to the tarmac, Jonathan Choi reappeared, offering a respectful nod. "Your plane is ready, Ms. Miller," he said. "Shall I escort you?" She shook her head. "I'll board in my own way, thank you. But I appreciate everything." He paused, then lowered his voice. "You handled that lounge situation with remarkable composure. Let me assure you, changes will happen swiftly. Our staff will not forget this." She met his gaze, sensing the sincerity in his words. "I trust you," she replied softly. "After all, if we can't fix problems from within, we don't deserve to run an airline." He inclined his head in agreement. Outside, the afternoon sunlight bathed the runway in a bright glare, making the polished planes gleam like majestic birds waiting to soar. A designated cart ferried Evelyn to a sleek jet with the airline's brand newly intertwined with the name of Miller Airways. She couldn't help a small smile as she spotted the new livery, realizing the rebranding was well underway. A flight attendant welcomed her at the door, bowing slightly in a gesture of respect. Inside the cabin was tastefully arranged with plush seats and subtle gold trimmings, far from the gaudy lounge. Despite the plane's luxurious appointments, it retained an air of practical comfort. That balance had always been Evelyn's vision, to offer real comfort without drowning passengers in ostentation. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Evelyn settled into a seat by the window, exhaling a long breath. She allowed herself to reflect on the day's events. The humiliation she'd experienced had stung, but it also validated her reason for traveling incognito. People's genuine attitudes emerge when they believe no one important is watching. She had learned more in that lounge about staff conduct, about passenger arrogance, about the fragility of status than she could have gleaned from reading any corporate report. Her father's teachings looped in her head. Money and power can vanish in an instant, but character remains. In that lounge, she had seen how readily people abandoned kindness if they thought you didn't measure up to their standards. Now she had the means to address it. The engines roared and the jet taxied onto the runway. Through the window, the airport terminal shrank in the distance. Evelyn saw planes lined up, some from partner airlines, some from rival carriers, each representing thousands of travelers with stories of their own. She wondered how many had faced belittlement simply for not fitting a mold. She recalled how the lounge staff and passengers had treated her, and a steely resolve took shape within her. "We'll do better," she murmured under her breath. "We have to." Once airborne, the flight attendant offered her a menu of gourmet options, but she simply asked for tea. She wasn't hungry. Nerves hummed in her blood, a mix of relief and simmering adrenaline. She opened her paperback, attempting to read, but her eyes skimmed the lines without absorbing their meaning. Instead, her mind drifted to the immediate future, drafting new training modules for staff, implementing a surprise audit system for the airline's premium lounges worldwide, ensuring empathy at every level of customer interaction. She jotted down a few notes on a small notepad from her backpack, scribbling words like respect, invisible wealth, dignity, and accountability. Above the clouds, with the plane humming steadily, she found a moment of calm. Sunlight streamed in, painting the cabin in a gentle glow. In that glow, she remembered another childhood memory, dancing barefoot with her mother in the orchard behind their estate. They had no regard for what passers-by might think, simple joys shared without shame. Her father, watching from the porch, had said, "Evelyn, never forget how it feels to be free from judgment." She inhaled, letting that memory ground her. Yes, owning an airline was a monumental responsibility, but it also gave her the power to protect that sense of freedom for others. She could ensure that no one in her domain was judged for being simple, for wearing the wrong clothes, for carrying an old backpack. 2 hours later, as the plane descended toward her final destination, Evelyn felt oddly renewed. The fiasco at the lounge seemed a lifetime ago, yet the lessons were fresh. She quietly steeled herself for the corporate meetings that awaited her, endless proposals, press briefings, and stakeholder negotiations. She would handle them all with the same calm dignity that had carried her through the lounge incident, because that was the core of who she was, a woman taught to stand tall, even when others tried to dismiss her. A woman who had inherited not just wealth but the heart of humility from a father who believed in showing kindness instead of parading power. When the jet landed and taxied to a private gate, Evelyn stepped off. A small gathering of executives and local staff waited wearing uncertain smiles, each eager to greet the new airline owner. She could see their relief that she wore a polite expression, her stance unthreatening. "Ms. Miller," they chorused, bending forward. "Welcome, and we look forward to your leadership," she nodded, shaking hands, offering no air of condescension. "Thank you," she said. "I look forward to working with all of you. Let's focus on making travel a better experience for everyone." Some of them, accustomed to brash, power-hungry figures, didn't quite know how to handle her calm sincerity, but she would show them in time. In the subsequent weeks, Evelyn's story of humiliation at the lounge circulated quietly among the staff who had been there. Rumor flew that she had single-handedly dismantled the entire lounge's elitist culture in a single afternoon. Her directive required every lounge manager to personally greet each passenger, ensuring no one was turned away or shamed based on attire. It mandated regular empathy training for staff integrated with standard operating procedures. She refused to release any public statement about her lounge experience. No dramatic press conference, no social media crusade, believing that quiet reforms would speak louder than any sensational story. The employees who had witnessed the confrontation never forgot it, though. Among themselves, they whispered how the new owner had faced down a room of sneers in jeans and a sweater, how she'd undone their shallow judgments by merely existing in her truth. Gradually, news filtered back to her about changes in the lounge's atmosphere. Passengers commented on improved courtesy, on staff who engaged without scorn, and on a general shift away from the cold prestige that once dominated. And while occasional pockets of arrogance persisted, some habits die hard, her presence had left an irreversible mark. Most importantly, it gave her a blueprint for deeper changes throughout the airline. She learned from the fiasco how to spot cracks in the system where prejudice lurked, how to address them, and how to ensure they wouldn't sprout anew. Throughout it all, she kept her father's teachings close. She'd recall his gentle admonitions about never flaunting money, about always seeing the humanity in people. She also remembered her mother's silent grace under scorn. In board meetings, some longtime executives blinked in disbelief as she listened more than she spoke, wearing unassuming outfits and carrying plain files instead of brand-name briefcases. But every so often, she would gently redirect a conversation toward empathy, or wave away an overtly lavish expense, or comment on how simpler solutions were often the best. Over time, they realized that Evelyn's approach was quietly revolutionary. When combined with her unwavering sense of purpose, it drove the airline's transformation forward in leaps. Back at that largest international airport, the lounge once more buzzed with travelers rushing to connect flights. But there was a new sense of ease in how staff welcomed people, and open courtesy extended even to those wearing the simplest of clothes or carrying the cheapest of luggage. A small sign had been posted, discreet but visible, reading, "All travelers welcome here." Dress, age, or status do not determine your worth. It was the lounge manager's personal homage to Evelyn's day of reckoning. The staff who had been present that day, including the once haughty staffer, made sure every passenger was treated with courtesy, offering them coffee or tea, guiding them to comfortable seats, and helping them with concerns. A subtle warmth now replaced the old chill of arrogance. And though Evelyn herself no longer passed through that lounge often, her schedule took her across the globe, her legacy there remained. Occasionally, rumors sparked that she might appear unannounced, wearing jeans and an old sweater, testing if the new approach still held strong. Each rumor caused staff to straighten their posture and greet every newcomer with genuine kindness, lest they miss the opportunity to do things right. Some prayed she would return, so they could express their gratitude for the quiet revolution she had kindled. Others dreaded the possibility, fearing they might stumble again. But in either case, the net result was the same: the lounge had changed, and so had the airline's outlook. Respect was no longer reserved for the obviously wealthy. It was offered to all. Late one evening, after a round of intercontinental flights, Evelyn found herself alone in a corporate suite in Paris, finishing a meeting with some European partners. She sank into a chair, exhaustion settling in her bones. She considered how far she'd come from that day in the lounge when she was nearly dragged out by security for dressing in a manner unworthy of first-class illusions. Now more than ever, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She realized her father's inheritance wasn't merely the money or the stake in airlines. It was the wisdom to remain humble, the courage to challenge the superficial structures that stifle humanity. She decided to carry that mission further beyond the lounge, into every corner of the aviation world. If she could encourage staff and passengers alike to see past exteriors, perhaps flying itself might become a more humanizing experience. She made a private vow then in the quiet glow of a foreign city's night. I will keep wearing these jeans, these sweaters. I'll keep traveling incognito whenever I can. Let them show me their true colors, and then I'll show them what real power looks like: kindness and humility. The vow sealed itself in her heart, warming her with the sense that she was continuing a family legacy. Because in the end, the family she hailed from had always believed in using wealth to elevate the world, not lord over it. And so Evelyn's story intertwined with that of her newly acquired airline. Wherever she flew, she left behind glimpses of the transformation she championed: a staff more attuned to dignity, a set of procedures revised to remove elitist barriers, a quiet code that any passenger might be the hidden owner of the entire enterprise. Word spread, half legend, half reality. Some who encountered her in plain clothes took to calling her the Quiet Storm, marveling at how she could upend entire cultures without raising her voice or brandishing her riches. Eventually, the day came when she passed once again through that same airport. She wore her usual sweater and jeans, her hair tied into a modest bun, her old canvas backpack in hand. This time, though, she walked into the lounge not to test them, but to see how they had changed. She found the staff wearing genuine smiles, greeting everyone warmly. The businesswoman from that fateful day was nowhere to be seen, but a younger professional offered her a seat without any hint of judgment about her attire. A tray of refreshments was served, and not a single voice questioned her presence. One staffer, possibly recognizing her from old rumors, gave a slight bow but said nothing. Evelyn nodded back content. She gazed around, seeing travelers from various walks of life, some in suits, others in casual wear, mingling without tension. The memory of her earlier humiliation felt distant, replaced by the tangible sense that her mission had already borne fruit. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting gratitude wash over her. She realized that no matter how large her influence grew, the essence of her father's teachings remained the same. Let your silence and your kindness speak for you, Evelyn. Let them stand as your emblem of power. In the hush of that lounge, she felt his presence and offered a silent thanks. Her flight was called overhead. She rose and collected her backpack. A wave of recognition passed among the staff, but they simply smiled, each of them understanding that no special show was needed. She left as quietly as she had come, stepping back into the airport's bustling corridors. The glass doors slid open and the swirl of travelers welcomed her into their midst. Perhaps she would remain invisible to most, but in her heart she carried the knowledge that real power had nothing to do with brand names or polished luggage. It lay in the unshakable assurance that one's worth is not measured by outward labels, but by the depth of one's humanity. If this story made you feel something like it, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Because sometimes the most powerful people don't dress the part, they just wait quietly until the world sees them for who they are.